Welcome to Wild Seat. The movie begins with an enthusiastic teacher giving a lecture on meteorites. Two of the female students are distracted by their phones, talking about boys, while the teacher continues to explain. At one point, he comes across a student sleeping and wakes him up. The students pay attention for a moment, but the student falls back asleep and starts snoring. Until the teacher yells at him, suddenly everything goes quiet as they hear a thunderous noise resembling a storm. The class ends and the students get up to leave. One of the girls gives her friend Julia a ticket to an event and they say goodbye to the teacher. Outside, a boy named Tom in a car stops and picks up Julia, driving off together. Later, Julia arrives home and asks her father for his binoculars, as she wants to go watch the meteor shower. However, her father forbids her from going, saying it's dangerous, and leaves. But Tom calls her and tells her they should sneak out. In another scene, a gigantic and menacing spaceship approaches Earth. Military ships and futuristic homes prepare for an imminent confrontation. The unknown object approaches from the north of Finland, causing an impressive military mobilization. Meanwhile, Tom, Julia, and their friend meet up at a tall building to watch the meteor shower. Other citizens also prepare for the spectacle in different parts of the city. Suddenly, all the phones experience interference and a huge ship appears above the city, causing fear and chaos. People begin to run as the ship destroys buildings in its path. Tom and Julia find themselves in danger in their room as the ship continues its destruction. Eventually, the ship crashes and comes to a stop. The military tries to organize the situation and heads to the crash site. Journalists report on the events, suspecting they might be of extraterrestrial origin. Chaos reigns in the city and nobody knows what to do. The main couple tries to seek help and eventually gets into a vehicle. News continues to report on the events as rescue forces try to help as many people as possible. The impact has been devastating and has caused numerous civilian casualties. All elite teams position themselves as two of their superiors approach the alien ship. They encounter an extraterrestrial android and try to communicate with it in different languages. The journalist kindly expresses his willingness to engage in dialogue, although the android doesn't seem to have friendly intentions. Later on, the general informs that they should wait and observe without attacking, and the world authorities follow his instructions. 2 days later, at the hospital, we see Julia recovering from her injuries and in shock. She discovers something disturbing and leaves her room in search of Tom, whom she asks about his deceased friend. The general appears and tells Tom that he risked his life to save her, but also accuses him of endangering his daughter. As they ride in the car, they talk about the many victims, and though Julia asks who they are, her father says no one knows. He informs her about the curfew set after 9 p.m. and gives her an ultimatum not to disobey him again. When they get home, they greet the grandmother and then the general leaves thoughtfully. The next day, Julia goes to school in an armored car and comes across the memory of her deceased friend. The professor tells them they must be patient, as they have been waiting for alien contact for many years. However, Julia disagrees and complains that they are not acting in the right way, as this is their home and their planet. Then, Julia gets up, leaves, goes to a safe, opens it, takes a weapon, and goes out into the street. In a garage, Tom and his friends watch videos of the aliens. Then, Julia appears and Tom's friends disagree, and a fight ensues. Eventually, they manage to reconcile. Julia asks if they have a plan and what they intend to do. Tom replies by asking what her proposal is, and she responds by showing them a weapon. Julia insists that they cannot wait after what they did. Tom assures her that he won't wait and that they will take action soon. Then, they go outside and begin to walk around the security perimeter. They equip themselves with flashlights and sticks before entering a network of tunnels. Upon exiting the other side, they arrive at an area guarded by the military near the ship. Julia stays in a car while Tom asks her to wait. Tom enters a building and finds a sort of bomb, realizing it fell from the sky. Julia, however, doesn't wait and enters nearby buildings, the old house of her deceased friend. At that moment, Julia receives a call, but when she answers, she only hears the last message from her friend. If you're enjoying the video, please give it a like. It only takes a second and it helps me out a ton. Suddenly, an alien appears and she shoots. However, the alien catches her before falling. Julia is mesmerized as she observes it. The rest of the group intervenes, striking the alien, which falls brutally to the ground. The group arrives at the location and discovers that it's wearing a type of armor and that it's bleeding, but Julia notices that whatever was inside the exoskeleton was ejected, but she keeps quiet. They decide to take the armor to the garage where they leave it hanging until the next day. Later, Julia gets up and goes out to explore on her own. Among some mannequins, she discovers a person who turns out to be a humanoid. She meets Google, a friend from school, and they both talk about the need to devise a plan of action. Subsequently, Julia calls a doctor friend and asks for an appointment at the hospital because she has a headache. They go undercover with the humanoid and, although her friend has doubts, Julia assures him they can't turn back now. They take the alien to a laboratory and begin to examine it. They clean its wounds and draw blood to analyze its blood type and determine the humanoid's blood type. Finally, Julia's friend faints. Julia performs a blood transfusion to save his life. After a while, the humanoid wakes up and they both stare at each other. The humanoid takes Julia's hand, transmitting some sort of emotional connection. Julia takes the humanoid to a basement and hides it there. Google tells her she needs to rest and that he will stay with it. While Julia showers at her home, she notices something strange about her skin. It seems to repel water. She is amazed as she watches the effect produced by this odd humanoid property. Later, at the military base, 4 soldiers arrive with a device that appears to be a bomb or an unknown object. Then, a specialist explains various theories to the high-ranking officers about the alien ship and its occupants. The general insists on avoiding initiating a conflict without provocation. Back in the basement, the humanoid gets up and tells Julia not to be afraid. It speaks her language and introduces itself as Ika. It asks Ekin to undo what it did to her, but he replies that it's already too late and that the transfer is completed. They ask what it is doing on Earth and it responds that it must return to its ship. They advise it to get dressed. Meanwhile, on the street, a police patrol stops the humanoid, believing it to be a drug addict. Julia and Google run after them shouting not to stop them, but the officers take him to the garage. Tom's friends try to break through the alien armor and realize that it regenerates. One of them tries to put on the suit and realizes it's an exoskeleton, but suddenly the suit absorbs him. They manage to free him, but he is very scared. They begin to discuss what to do with the suit and decide to turn it in. They call Julia's father and inform him that they have something urgent for him. A scene is shown where people try to get water, which has become a scarce commodity. Huge queues form and an uprising occurs. The guards begin to beat everyone, including Tom's friends who went to see the colonel to talk to him about the armor. Tom tells them to leave quickly as people are fed up and nobody stops. After a huge disturbance, they finally hit Tom and take him away. Next, we see the humanoid being taken to the police station. They ask him to place his hand to take his fingerprints, but upon seeing that he doesn't have any, everyone is puzzled. Meanwhile, the humanoid watches television and shows interest in leaving. At that moment, Tom appears and then Julia, who introduces the humanoid as her friend, showing an ID card identifying her as the leader's daughter. Despite the strange situation, they decide to release him, assuring that her father will intervene. Julia and the humanoid leave the police station and begin to socialize a bit. The humanoid turns out to be friendly and pleasant despite his nature. Meanwhile, on the news, it is reported that the unknown object has changed color. Julia tries to enter the military base with the humanoid to see her father, but a guard informs them that he is in a meeting. Julia then lies saying she is pregnant and they manage to be attended immediately without revealing that her companion is a humanoid. Julia's father thinks he's just a friend of his daughter. Finally, Julia gets an identification for the humanoid, who puts on a special suit and manages to enter the room where the necessary artifact to activate his ship is located. Upon realizing the situation, the alarm sounds, and everyone runs to secure the perimeter to prevent escape. However, Julia and the humanoid, along with the colonel, manage to leave without any problems. Meanwhile, Tom is released from the police station and meets up with his friends. Julia and the humanoid arrive at her house, where she begins to pack her things. Julia's dog approaches and she explains to the humanoid about her illness and her family, including her deceased mother and grandmother. The humanoid, who doesn't understand human customs very well, calls the grandmother old, to Julia's surprise. The humanoid heals the dog with a special device, restoring its vision. Afterwards, they all watch the news where it is reported that the extraterrestrials may have bad intentions. Meanwhile, the humanoid tries the jam and likes it, but then Julia jokes with him by giving him mustard, and he becomes disgusted. In the end, the news reveals that the humanoid has been identified as a search target. Later, they see that Julia's father gets upset upon discovering that her friend is the humanoid they are following, but they have already left. Julia finds the tickets her friend gave her before dying and goes to the concert with the humanoid, her new love. She tells him that they won't be discovered there, but someone recognizes them. It's actually Tom's friend, who calls Tom to tell him that his girlfriend is with someone else. Meanwhile, the humanoid and Julia join hands, merge, and everything stops. They emit a light that transports them to another dimension, the humanoid's planet, where they learn about the values of a developed civilization that lives in peace and has no evil intentions. He warns Julia that this technology cannot fall into human hands, as they are destructive. Before saying goodbye, they hug, and the humanoid leaves. At that moment, Julia receives a call from Tom asking where she is. Julia tells him she can't or doesn't want to. Tom understands and wishes her luck, but suddenly Tom appears with his angry friends. He hits the humanoid, who does not defend himself, while Tom reprimands Julia. One of the friends finds the humanoid's object, thus discovering that they are superior beings, but they continue to attack. Finally, when Tom hits Julia, the humanoid reacts and begins to demonstrate what he's capable of, moving quickly. In an unexpected turn, one of the friends shoots the humanoid, but ends up injuring another friend. At that moment, the military appears, and the rest flee. The humanoid offers to help but cannot save the wounded from death. Later, we see Tom giving a speech to a crowd, talking about his deceased friend. Everyone listens because they have all lost someone. He complains about the government and how they only defend the humanoids. He urges everyone to rise up against the humanoids, as they want their planet and Earth. Humans begin to take up arms and mobilize. The professor is in the middle of the crowd screaming for them not to do it, but no one listens. Tom asks his friend for the garage key and leaves. Julia and the humanoid are arrested, and while they talk, the military orders them to be quiet. But they continue to chat and get intimate. Then we see the fed-up crowd heading towards the ship shouting, "This is our planet." Later, we see the president receiving an emergency call, informing him that an armed crowd is heading towards the ship. Tom, wearing the exoskeleton, heads towards the ship. Subsequently, we return to the military zone where Julia, the humanoid, and her father argue. Julia's father examines the mysterious device and asks who the humanoid is. He warns them that everyone will die if they don't do something soon. Thus begins a confrontation between humans and aliens. The colonel receives a call from the president, who orders him to do whatever it takes to confront the situation. Julia, in a desperate act, takes a gun and flees with the humanoid. Suddenly, Tom, wearing the exoskeleton, appears and attacks the vehicle in which Julia and the humanoid are in. After several blows, he manages to overturn the vehicle and the humanoid confronts Tom. The fight between the humanoid and Tom is brutal, but the humanoid demonstrates superior speed and abilities. Meanwhile, humans continue to fight against the aliens. Tom manages to trap the humanoid and hits him furiously, but just before he can finish him off, Julia appears driving the vehicle and rams into Tom, who loses an arm in the process. When a soldier is about to shoot Tom, he hits him. The colonel raises his hands in surrender in front of the aliens, but at that moment, Tom takes a gun and shoots Julia. The colonel runs towards his daughter. The alien ship emits sounds and picks up the humanoid and Julia, accompanied by the colonel, introducing them into capsules. They are informed that they are being healed and the colonel asks if they will survive. The alien voice explains that Earth is an extremely aggressive and conflictive planet, and that they only observe less developed civilizations. The voice adds that Julia's behavior has been the only remarkable thing in their study and that they must reevaluate the situation. Julia opens her eyes, and she and the colonel smile with relief, but the humanoid is unconscious. Julia watches him through tears. The ship takes off, and Julia and the Colonel watch as it fades away. Everyone contemplates as the ship fades away into the horizon. Julia addresses the camera and reflects on how someone from outer space trusted humans more than themselves. The experience changed their lives forever, and Julia is grateful to be alive and well. But the adventure doesn't end here. I'll see you in the next summary video. Let's go!